Welcome to Access Ann Arbor. I'm Chef John Rasmussen. I'm the program director with One Love, One World. Who are we? We're a volunteer organization, and our mission is to prevent diabetes type 1 in children and to help people to control diabetes type 2 in mothers and adults. Today I'm here with Hannah Mathia, who is a volunteer with One Love, One World and has helped co-teach our classes at the Corner Health Center in Ypsilanti and participated in our programs. Chris Engel, who's with us, who's also helped co-teach our classes at the Corner Health Center in Ypsilanti, which is a program for youth between the ages of 12 and 25. Today we're going to be talking about diabetes myths. I'm sure you've always heard a myth about diabetes. The number one diabetes myth is don't eat sugar. Well, now sugar could be a problem, but it's probably not the number one problem because it doesn't really trigger diabetes. But before we get into the myths, I'd like to have Hannah tell us a little bit about herself and how you came to be involved in this volunteer organization. Tell us, Hannah, how did you get involved in One Love, One World?
Okay, thank you, John, actually, for having me on here. And I was originally just looking to volunteer in the community, and I was on, online on one of the volunteer websites, and I saw a position for One Love, One World, and it was more of like a librarian position. I really thought, cataloging, I thought that I was just going to be doing handling books and organizing stuff and, just something. And then when I met with Chef John on, it was actually Memorial Day. He took the time to meet with me. We started talking about health and wellness and myths about different sicknesses, especially diabetes. And I myself have had my own physical problems. I've been diagnosed with IBS, and that's been on and off all my life, and I've almost died from it twice. And so really knowing that you can control your health and you have that control, that was just really comforting and refreshing. But yeah, I came about this because I was looking to volunteer in the community. So.
Well, thank you for sharing. And Chris, how did you become interested in One Love, One World and volunteering?
Well, I started a long time ago. When I was 16 years old, I was diagnosed with leukemia, and I went through a lot of different treatments, ended up having to get a bone marrow transplant. And one of the side effects from some of the medication I was on was I ended up coming down with type 2 diabetes.
At what age did you develop type 2 diabetes?
It was when I was 16 years old.
At 16 years of age,
Yeah.
type 2 diabetes.
Yep. And it was a lot of work to control my blood sugar and a lot of issues I developed because of it. And luckily for me, when I stopped using that medication, I was able to completely go into remission from type 2 diabetes. And but I learned that it was quite a difficult condition to live with. So one of the things I did was I researched how to heal your body with foods and exercise, and I tried to change my diet, researched and started growing my own food, started learning about different ways to control what type of issues your body has to deal with. And later in life, I met John through a different avenue. We worked together in a different capacity, but I was glad to come on board and work with you with One Love, One World and help with the diabetes prevention.
Thank you for sharing. We're going to go into a little bit of discussion here, and we want to throw out some of the myths to begin with. We have here on the table that Hannah has 5 pounds of sugar. How much sugar, Hannah, is in this bottle of Mountain Dew? If I read the label, it says 46 grams. I don't know what a gram is. This is all liquid. Now tell me how much sugar is really in that bottle.
So when you take,
you want to show us?
oh yeah, I can show. Okay. It's getting a little messy. This is just like a regular size spoon, kitchen spoon. And there's actually, in this size pop, and this is a Mountain Dew, I figure that's a pretty popular drink. I personally don't drink pop. But in this one, there's 22 spoonfuls of this white sugar.
22 spoonfuls of sugar in that one bottle?
Yes.
Chris, what are some of the alternatives to drinking soda pop?
Well, there's a lot of juice alternatives, but you still need to be careful because many of those are only 1 to 3% juice. So, personally, I like to just drink water.
Any special kind of water? You have well water, tap water?
Well, yes, I like to drink well water at home, but there is some things you need to worry about with city water. There's most city waters have fluoride in them and different contaminants. So just because it comes out of your faucet doesn't mean it's really safe to drink.
My gosh, Hannah, that glass is almost half, not quite half full. How many spoonfuls do you have in
So
there?
I'm at 13.
13, and how many?
There's 22.
14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
It's kind of clumped.
19, 20, 21,
and 22.
22.
That's
much
how much sugar
in
you're
that
drinking.
bottle, and is that 2 servings in, or 1 serving?
That would be 1 serving.
1 serving. That's a lot of sugar. Now, sugar is not the main problem in diabetes, but it can contribute. And many times we're told to stop eating sugar and count your carbs. Well, how many carbs are in a banana? Banana doesn't have a label of carbs on it. How many carbs are in an apple? There's no label that says carbs. How many carbs are in an orange? There's no label on it. When my grandson came down with diabetes at age 22 months, where did he get that diabetes? Did he get it from me, through my genes, or through his mother or father? Research shows that type 1 diabetes is triggered by a food, not by soda pop, but by a food that's very commonly fed to children. In fact, it's a food that is fed to children in their infant formula. Now, I'm not making this up, but I'll quote the New England Journal of Medicine, in which the research published in the New England Journal of Medicine shows that the children who have type 1 diabetes have antibodies for food. And that food that they found in the research was casein. What is casein? Casein is a protein that's found in infant formula and is found in cow's milk. If you're not sure, if you don't believe me, I suggest there are several very good publications out there. The China study is one by T. Colin Campbell, and the other one is research published by Dr. Neal Barnard. I earned a certificate in his diabetes education program, and I've been teaching diabetes prevention in Brazil in a medical clinic. I teach it in Jamaica in a medical clinic and in churches and community centers as well as Ann Arbor. We've taught classes in Chelsea, and we've taught in Ypsilanti, I've taught in Romulus, taught in Detroit, and other cities. And many times we find it is the mothers who are most interested in learning about diabetes, because the mothers are taking care of their children, their husband, maybe their sister or their brother, and possibly even their parents. Diabetes type 1 is only in about 5% of the population that have diabetes. Type 2 is 90 or 95% of the diabetes cases. What is the cost, not just in the fact that you have to prick yourself 5 times a day before meals and in the morning and at night to find out what your blood sugar is, but the time and the limitations that may put on a person's life. You had some questions, Chris. What was your question you had about what can a diabetic person do? Are they restricted in their ability to participate in sports or activities? What do you see as the issue with type 1? You were active in sports, right?
Yes,
You're a hockey player.
I played a lot of hockey.
And do you know of any diabetics who are playing hockey? Is that a restriction, or could you play hockey if you had diabetes?
I didn't know of any diabetics that played hockey personally.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's my grandson played football. He's just turned 16, but in his school in Dexter, he was, and I believe he's played soccer, and he was not told that he couldn't do it. He does have to watch his blood sugar, but it doesn't prevent him from being active. And I think what has happened many times, people may back off of becoming involved in sports or activities because they have diabetes, but you don't necessarily have to stop participating in activities such as sports. I found from my grandson, who has to prick himself 5 times a day, and he has had some relapses. And the sad part is when your blood sugar gets very high or very low, this can cause complications. Teaching classes in diabetes prevention in a clinic in Jamaica, we found that as much as 2 out of 3 women working in the soup kitchen had type 2 diabetes. The man who owned the house where I was renting a room a few years ago developed type 2 diabetes in advanced stage and actually went blind. I've met him and his son a number of times. A fisherman in Jamaica, in the same fishing village, who would haul his boat, 2 men, to the sea, across the road and up the hill and back every day that they went fishing, did not or was not aware how serious his foot issues were. And when he did get to the doctor and did get to the hospital, they ended up amputating a foot. And there's a fisherman which is going to restrict his livelihood to be able to carry his boat wearing crutches or using crutches. So it does have side effects. But I think if we look at the other side of the coin, there are benefits for a diabetic if they consider some lifestyle changes. And we're not talking medications, we're talking lifestyle. And in type 2, which is totally different from type 1 diabetes, type 1 diabetes is generally not reversible. I know of 2 cases of type 1 which have been reversed. One was the daughter of a Russian nurse. Her name is Victoria Bochenko. The other one was from a doctor who actually had a patient who had type 1 and they were able to reverse it. But generally it's not. Type 2 is preventable, it's controllable, and in some cases reversible. We've had 2 people here in Ann Arbor. One person lives in Ypsilanti, the other in Ann Arbor, in their 60s, who have taken 5 hours and some of them 3 classes from One Love One World. And these 2, their doctors have taken them off their diabetes medications. Wow. So type 2 is preventable, controllable, and reversible. Do you have any questions, Chris or Hannah?
Yeah. Are diabetics at risk for eating dairy products?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. One of the risk foods, more of a risk probably than the sugar, is dairy products. Why? Because every child in the research published in the New England Journal of Medicine who had type 1 diabetes had the antibodies for cow's milk protein. That's type 1 diabetes. Type 2, Dr. Neal Barnard, president of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, published research in 2005 which found that cow's milk and dairy products were blocking the uptake of insulin in type 2 diabetics. In type 2 diabetes, they still produce insulin, but they can't get the insulin into their blood to produce energy. So it increases their blood sugar because the diabetes cannot act to lower the blood sugar. The other problem are animal foods. And by substituting sometimes one food for another, it may not be overnight, you could substitute almond milk, cashew's milk, any other type of nut milk for cow's milk, and this might help a person with type 1 and type 2 to stabilize their blood sugar. Because even in type 1, consumption of a lot of dairy products could make the diabetes a person which has higher blood sugar. It's not going to be something that's going to prevent it, but it might help reduce blood sugar and reduce their need for insulin. And I'm not a doctor. We are all volunteers. We've had training, and we want to help people prevent diabetes. We want to help prevent diabetes in children. We want mothers to be aware that they can prevent diabetes in their children. We want to help prevent diabetes in mothers, and they will teach their family. They are the primary caregivers, which is what we've found. Again, our mission as volunteers is to prevent diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Christopher, do you have any other questions?
Can diabetics eat what they want in moderation, or
do
they have to stick to a strict diet?
Can diabetics eat what they want, or they need to stick to their diet? Well, it's a myth that you have to stick to counting your carbohydrates. This is the common approach, is you have to count the carbohydrates before you eat the food, then inject yourself with insulin, test yourself, then inject yourself. This, unfortunately, is so commonly a belief, and it's taught widely, to count your carbs. My grandson counts his carbs. Counting carbs does not prevent diabetes. Counting calories does not prevent diabetes. What helps prevent diabetes is removing the foods which could trigger diabetes. It's not the carbs that trigger it. It is the dairy products and the animal products and cooking oils and some salad dressings which trigger it. When you remove those, diabetes has been controlled, in many cases reversed, in as little as 3 months. Some people it's a year, for some people it's less. But counting the carbs does not reduce your risk of diabetes, nor does it prevent it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Or, any other questions that you have?
Is diabetes type 1 caused by unknown factors?
Well, some people say that, and it's published, that we don't know what causes type 1 diabetes. New England Journal of Medicine says it's cow's milk protein, and in that research it was the protein found in infant formula. When we teach the diabetes classes to nurses and midwives in Jamaica, we go to the store, we buy 3 different types of infant formula, we pass it around, we read the labels, and you'll find cow's milk is one of the main ingredients. And some of them are soy-based, but many of them are cow's milk-based. And the nurses are recommending breastfeeding instead of infant formula. So.
Now, what if the mother is consuming dairy when she's breastfeeding? Does that kind of...
Well, again, I'm not a doctor, but they believe that even if the mother is consuming the dairy products, she will pass possibly those proteins to the infant. What they found, though, in the research, it was not based upon breast milk, it was based upon infant formula. And that was found in every child who had type 1 diabetes in the research, had the antibodies for the cow's milk, and at the ages which they got it, they identified they had all had infant formula.
Okay.
So
Poor babies.
we are at a stage today where medicine in form of drugs has been the primary treatment. And for the type 1 diabetic, over their life, they will spend $15,000 a year. Did you know that? $15,000 a year. It may shorten their lifespan, and over 60 years' time, that would be $900,000 for diabetes drugs, whether it's metformin, whether it's insulin. The test strips alone, just to test your blood, cost $1,800 a year, depending on the type of test strips that you use. And it's sad that we're using drugs rather than removing the foods from the diet and then adding alternative foods to the diet, so we do not. What would be a safe form of sugar other than this?
I would say a real cane sugar.
A cane sugar might, cane sugar.
Which actually, when you see real cane sugar, my mom buys it, and it's definitely thicker granules, and it's probably about, I don't know if the camera can catch it, but it's probably about that thick, and it's got more of a brown color to it. This is bleached. You see the sugar in the cup that's bleached, and it's extremely processed, and it's not, your body doesn't know what to do with that. So you could do a real cane sugar, you can do a real natural honey, like you can find a bee farmer who gets honey straight from the beehives that he farms, and that's a really good source of sweetening for your foods. I use honey a lot in, cooking my teas, because I like to drink tea. It's a great way to sweeten that. So those are 2 really good ways to substitute for this bleached falsity.
Chris, what will you substitute for white sugar? What you use?
I usually just avoid sweetening my food if I have to. I mean, it's a choice. You don't necessarily need sweet foods to enjoy them. A lot of other foods are sweet on their own. Fruits, just put blueberries and strawberries in your breakfast granola, and mix smoothies with real fruits instead of using protein mixes, which got a lot of byproducts in them. And
Speaking of breakfast, what did you have for breakfast today?
Just some oatmeal with some blueberries and strawberries and some almond
Oatmeal,
milk,
blueberries, and strawberries. That sounds
brown
pretty
sugar.
good. Hannah, what do you have for breakfast? Or what do you usually have for breakfast?
So actually, I do remember what I had for breakfast today. And it was cream of wheat, but I added some cocoa powder to it, the Nesquik cocoa powder, to make it chocolatey. And then I just put some coconut milk on it. Yeah, because I like chocolate.
I must admit, this morning I had a green smoothie, and I had a apple, pear, and I had some cranberries left over. They were fresh. I put some cranberries in there, and maybe half a banana. And then I put some kale in it. And I did put a little chocolate in it as well, not powder, not the sweet chocolate, but the powder, without adding any sugar to it. And it really tasted pretty good. And I've been living on that because I've been traveling today and working, and I have lots of energy. In our classes, which we were teaching, we offer programs in the fall, which we can find on our website. We've been teaching at the Corner Health Center in Ypsilanti 3 classes. We hold a retreat in Chelsea at the Michigan Friends Center. We have an annual meeting which we hold at the Blue Nile restaurant here in Ann Arbor on Washington Street. And we also have classes which we have taught in the Senior Center in Belleville, taught in the high school in Romulus, at a school in Detroit, and at other locations where we are invited. And One Love, One World is, in the last 2.5 years, we've taught almost 500 youth, mothers, nurses, including classes in Brazil, Jamaica, and Michigan. Any other questions you have? Did we answer your questions tonight, or are there any more myths that we missed?
You touched on type 1 diabetes. Is that an autoimmune disease, or is that?
Type 1 is an autoimmune disease in review, where the body attacks itself. It attacks itself because the undigested milk, cow's milk, leaks through the gut and into the blood, and the body's immune system attacks that foreign substance, but it shuts down the beta cells of the pancreas, and once they are shut down, no more insulin is produced by the body. And that's type 1. Type 2 still may produce insulin. Type 1, no insulin is produced. But it's not counting calories, it's not counting carbs. It's dietary changes that will make a difference. I want to thank you, Hannah, for all of your volunteer work, which you've been continuing and helping with Facebook and with teaching classes and teaching this class to youth. And Chris has been very helpful with the website, with volunteering, with co-teaching classes. And we invite other people to go to oneloveoneworld.org. We are a not-for-profit, a Michigan not-for-profit. And we thank you for listening to our program today, and we hope to see you perhaps at one of our class, or tell a friend and share the information which we are sharing with you tonight. We're all volunteers. None of us are paid for this. We believe in what we're talking about. We want to get the word out. Thank you so much for listening today.